Devi salire da sopra, devi salire dove c'è il caso.
Sei accademiani, la review non sta cambiata qui? Te lo faccio domani.
Non lo so, io quello non lo conosco. Io non
ask you if you are going to
I think it's going to.
Yeah.
Might be.
questo mo lo tolgo io. Questo dove... No, no, è semplicemente che mi ha messo un cavalletto un po' più grande, quindi... Però sta messo esattamente dove sta nel puoi farlo. Considera che questo mo lo tolgo, devi dare giusto tempo di fare questa qua. Tutte le cose mi dispiace sinceramente ma sicuramente da qualche parte c'è, il problema è uno. Sì, insomma, non è una fondazione. Vabbè che ha usato una televisione mondiale. Ma poi 5 centimetri più là, mo aspetta, controlliamo. Ma anche proprio in generale, questo qui l'ha provato. 5 centimetri no, perché copro io. Milano.
considera l'istituto solo momento per darvi qualche indicazione su come si svolgerà adesso questo rito di narrata concentrata. Ci sarà un'introduzione, finale, coloring, dopodiché si inizierà la processione. Inizieremo dal punto, almeno la corrente,
Laudetur Jesus Christus. Praised be Jesus Christ, and a very warm welcome to all of you joining us for this live broadcast of the liturgical ceremony for the entrance into the Sistine Chapel of the Cardinal Electors, which will mark the beginning of the conclave that will elect a new successor of St. Peter.
On behalf of the entire Vatican News team, we would like to welcome all of you from wherever you are joining us from around the world. A special welcome to all of those following along through our TV partners, EWTN TV, Catholic Faith Network in America, Shalom World Television Network USA, Admadarshan TV, Catholic TV, Madad TV India, and UCTV Uganda Catholic Television. And also a special welcome to all of our radio partners, Luminous Radio and Radio Katipunan in the Philippines. Very special welcome.
My name is Christopher Wells.
And I'm Kelsey Gussie.
And we will be providing the English language commentary and translation for this special liturgical service at the start of the conclave. The process of electing a new pope is a centuries-old process that is absolutely steeped in tradition. The actual ceremony has been in use for several hundred years, and as we go to air, we will be translating the various parts of the ceremony and explaining for you what's going on. As Kelsey mentioned, we are broadcasting also on radio, so we will be giving a description of what some of you will be seeing on your television or computer screens.
And once the procession begins, the cardinals, the 133 cardinal electors, will process into the Sistine Chapel to, again, begin the conclave. And once inside, each cardinal will stand and place his hand on the gospel, and he will recite the oath of secrecy that binds him during and after the conclave. And each one will declare in this oath, "So help me God and these holy gospels which I touch with my hand."
And this whole ceremony, as you know, takes place in the Sistine Chapel this evening. What we'll be seeing is we will take you live to the Sistine Chapel, and you can see now on your screens the room just outside the Sistine Chapel, which is where the procession will begin. And the order for the procession will begin with the Masters of Ceremonies, with a cross-bearer and candle-bearers, a number of functionaries who will take part in what we might call the opening ceremony for the conclave, followed by the cardinal electors. And when the cardinal electors go in, there's a very strict hierarchy, even amongst the cardinals. So the College of Cardinals is composed of 3 different orders, all cardinals, with one exception, all bishops. But within the College of Cardinals, there are cardinal bishops, cardinal priests, and cardinal deacons, as well as amongst the cardinal electors, one cardinal patriarch of Oriental Rite. That's Luis Rafael Sacco. And when they enter, they will enter in reverse hierarchical order. So the most recent cardinal deacon will be the first amongst the cardinal electors in the procession. He'll be followed in order by the other cardinal deacons. Then they will go to the order of cardinal presbyters. The most recently created cardinal presbyter will be first in line, followed again in order by the other cardinal presbyters according to the date on which they were created. And finally, the Cardinal Patriarch, Luis Rafael Sacco. And finally, the 4 cardinal bishops who are eligible to take part in the conclave. Those are Pietro Parolin, Fernando Filoni, Luis Antonio Tagle, and Robert Francis Prevost. So that will be the order of entry for the cardinals.
And I think, Chris, you touched on it a bit by talking about the fact that there is a Cardinal Patriarch of the Oriental Rite, that this conclave is one of the most diverse in history, with electors hailing from about 70 countries, which shows a great effort through the years to broaden the representation in the church. And I think it'll be really interesting to see, as we see the procession enter in, the people, the cardinals from all over the world.
And in fact, from in the earliest days of the church, there were different means of electing popes, including election by the clergy of the Church of Rome. Once the conclaves took their kind of modern form, the vast majority of papal elections were decided by cardinals from Europe, including primarily cardinals from Italy, but also cardinals from England, France, Spain, the Netherlands. We've had a Dutch pope, we've had an English pope, and especially in the past 150 years is the first time in the modern church that we've seen cardinals representing countries from all the different continents from all over the world. The process this evening, after the procession into the Sistine Chapel, the cardinals will find their places. Each one has an assigned place, again based on the order of their creation and the order within which they are cardinals. And at the conclusion of the ceremony, we'll describe that for you as we go on. At the conclusion of the ceremony, the doors of the Sistine Chapel are formally closed. The Master of Pontifical Liturgical Ceremonies makes the proclamation extra omnes in Latin, which literally translates as everyone out. And everyone except for the cardinal electors at that moment will leave the Sistine Chapel, and it is foreseen that the cardinals will then proceed to first any necessary business that needs to be discussed and resolved, and then they'll proceed immediately to an election. Immediately after the extra omnes proclamation, Cardinal Raniero Cantalamessa, the former preacher of the papal household, will deliver a meditation, inviting the cardinals into a space of prayer and discernment before the deliberations begin.
Well, and as you mentioned, Chris, since they're taking, well, as we talked about, the oath of secrecy that the cardinals are taking today, specifically regarding the conclave, what happens now and in the future, it's not just them that also take an act or an oath of secrecy. It extends, that it happened earlier this week actually, that all personnel that are involved in this aspect of the conclave take an oath of secrecy to remain absolutely secret, to not spill anything that happens during this time, and that includes the medical staff, if there's need for them, liturgical assistants. Even the Swiss Guards would have to take an oath of secrecy to make sure that it remains absolute in this form of electing a new pope, which would be the 200.
And in fact, as you say, that also extends even to the housekeepers, the people who are preparing the meals for the cardinals. The cardinals, over the period from last night through today, have taken up residence in the Casa Santa Marta, the former residence of Pope Francis, which is also a residence for numerous prelates and priests and others who are involved in work in the Vatican. And when it comes time to elect a pope, they all have to move out of their homes. Right. It's written into their contracts, and they, the staff of the Vatican City State prepares those rooms for the cardinals who will be taking part in the election. This time, as Kelsey might be able to tell us about here in a moment, there are more cardinals than ever before in a conclave. So not only is the residence of Casa Santa Marta taken up, but also a number of rooms in the former Casa Santa Marta, the old Santa Marta, to ensure that there's space for all of the cardinals. Each of them has a very modest room with a bed, a table, a chair, and not much else, a crucifix. And as one of the cardinals said, it really is, once you get into the conclave, a very prayerful, meditative atmosphere. There's not room for major speeches. They go in, they do the business of praying and voting and hopefully listening to the voice of the Holy Spirit. Kelsey, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the large number of cardinals that are going to be taking part in this conclave.
Well, as we saw, I mean, for sure, there is a greater number of cardinals from around the world. So not just hailing from Europe. We have cardinals from the African continent, from Asia, from the Americas. And so there is, as we would see, a greater representation from countries that have never had a cardinal elector in a conclave before. For example, even in, I think it was Tonga, there's a cardinal as well who's partaking, and this is extra special for the country to be able to claim or to have a cardinal who's partaking and even just bringing the needs and the mission of the church in that country to Rome to talk about and to bring to the attention of the rest of the church. And so I think it's really interesting to see the makeup of the College of Cardinals today with the start of this conclave. And as you see in the images, if you're watching on screen, you can see the cardinals sitting and waiting, but also we saw images of the Sistine Chapel with, it almost looks like name tags for each of the cardinals. Mm-hmm. As Chris mentioned, they have their specific spots, and it's interesting that it wasn't always held in the Sistine Chapel, the conclave. I don't know if you...
well, first, as we look at, the cardinals are currently gathered in the Pauline Chapel, with very famous frescoes of the martyrdoms of St. Peter and St. Paul by Michelangelo. And they are preparing through silent prayer for the opening of this conclave. As you mentioned, Kelsey, the cardinals have come from all the different continents. And one of the things that, again, Kelsey, you mentioned that there's been a process over these past few decades of trying to ensure that the whole universal church is represented. That's something that Pope Francis especially was very concerned for. He made quite a number of cardinals from countries that had never had a cardinal before. Mm-hmm. So we are anticipating in about 5 more minutes the entrance procession should start, and will take place entirely in Latin, including the oaths and the prayers of the cardinal electors. And among the people that we will be seeing in the procession, which will begin shortly, we will have the the Master of Ceremonies will lead the procession with a cross bearer and 2 people bearing candles. They're followed by 2 cantors who will lead the hymns and the chants for the opening ceremony, and 2 members each from the College of Prelate Auditors of the Roman Rota and Protonotaries Apostolic de Numero, as well as there's a process where when the cardinal electors enter the Sistine Chapel, after the first expulsion of all non-essential personnel, a churchman has been chosen to offer meditation to the bishops, to the cardinal electors, which is largely focused on the very grave duty that they have of electing the man that God wants to be Pope, and of the necessity when they do so to enter into the conclave with the correct intentions. as the instruction says, having before their eyes only God, so only caring for what God is looking for in this election, and also being concerned solely with what is going to be best for the universal church. So in this case, the one chosen to deliver that meditation is in fact already a Cardinal Cantalamessa. He will be in the procession ahead of the Cardinal electors, and also the Vice Camerlengo and the Secretary of the Cardinal, the College of Cardinals.
So then following that, the cardinal electors, according to their orders, which we previously mentioned, Chrissy described, the cardinal deacons, the cardinal presbyters or priests, and the cardinal bishops according to seniority, so in terms of the reversed order. And then last comes the celebrant, accompanied by the master of the pontifical liturgical celebrations. And then we'll see the cardinals process into the Sistine Chapel, and as you mentioned, singing the Litany of the Saints, which also called to mind, I think, the universality of the church, but then also the meditative and reflective nature of the conclave and the seriousness of which the cardinals are entering into this election process.
And in fact, the master of pontifical liturgical celebrations, who is not a cardinal, does have an important role to play. As you said, there is a long, centuries-old tradition behind this ceremony and behind all of the ceremonies of the election of the Roman Pontiff. So the ceremoniere, the master of ceremonies, is there to direct the cardinals for the beginning of the conclave. He will leave after the initial ceremonies, and at that point they will have the solemn closing and locking of the doors of the Sistine Chapel. The instruction talks about posting guards at every entrance to the Sistine Chapel, locking the doors. The security services of the Holy See have already performed security sweeps, so they're going to make sure that there are no listening devices. There's no way that anyone can violate the secret of the conclave. And then when the cardinals carry out the election, that process is carried out by them alone. They choose the people who will read the votes. They choose the people who will ensure the process. There's also a group of 3 cardinals for each ballot that will go and collect ballots. If there's any cardinal who is sick, they can vote from their rooms if they've entered into the conclave. And the whole process of casting votes, of counting the votes, of certifying the votes, and even of burning the ballots after an election is carried out by the cardinals themselves. But then when we do see the election, and hopefully very soon we'll have a new pope, when the next pope is chosen, the cardinal, the master of ceremonies will again have an important role of ensuring the vote.
Venerabiles
And we are
fratres,
now seeing the beginning
cum
of
sacris
the
litavemus
conclave,
nunc
with
conclave
Cardinal
ad
Perlin
diligentum
speaking.
Romanum pontificem ingrediemur. Ecclesia universa nobis in oratione communi coniuncta, gratiam Spiritus Sancti instante
Cardinal
exorat,
Perlin is beginning
ut dignus
the
pastor
ceremony
universi gregis Christi
as
a nobis
the
eligatur.
ranking Cardinal
Dominus
Bishop,
dirigat gressus
as the
nostros
Dean of the
in via
College
veritatis,
of Cardinals is
ut
over the age of 80 and therefore not
intercedentibus
entitled
beata
to
semper
enter
Virgine
into
Maria,
the conclave. The
beatis
ceremony
apostolis
is
Petro et Paulo
with
et omnibus sanctis,
is
que eis
being
sunt placita semper agamus.
conducted under Cardinal Perlin. And he begins in the name of the with the sign of the cross, and a greeting to a liturgical greeting to the cardinals. He says, "May the Lord, who directs our hearts in the charity and patience of Christ, be with you all." In response, and with your spirit. And then a word of instruction to his brother cardinals. Venerable brothers, having celebrated the divine mysteries, they celebrated the Mass for the election of the new pontiff earlier today in St. Peter's Basilica. And he continues, let's now enter into the conclave to elect the Roman pontiff. He then recites a short prayer. May the universal church, joined with us in common prayer, invoke without delay the grace of the Holy Spirit, so that one from among us might be elected a worthy pastor of the whole flock of Christ. He continues, may the Lord direct our steps in the way of truth, that through the intercession of the Blessed Mary, ever Virgin, of the blessed apostles Peter and Paul, and of all the saints, we might always do what is pleasing to him. As we mentioned, the procession is now beginning with the cross-bearer and candles, and the Litany of the Saints, where we see alternating the cantors and those taking part in the procession. Cardinals are now entering the Sistine Chapel, following the various assistants and the Vice Cardinal and the Secretary of the College of Cardinals. The first of the Cardinal Deacons, the most recently named Cardinal Deacon, and the first to enter the conclave is George Jacob Kubakad. litany of the saints, invokes the various saints, the apostles, holy pontiffs, fathers of the church, doctors of the church, martyrs, holy men and women, and continues with invocations to God to deliver us from all evil, to deliver us from sin, and to deliver us through the various events of our Lord's life. And after each of those petitions, there is the invocation, Free us, O Lord, and then a series of different petitions to which the cardinals respond, We beseech thee, hear us. And all of those praying for guidance from the Holy Spirit in this process of electing a new pontiff.
gathered in the Sistine Chapel, and they have taken their proper place, and the book of the Gospel is set up in a place of honor or worth. The cardinals are finishing the litany, and Cardinal Pietro Parolin intones the hymn Veni Creator Spiritus, the solemn invocation of the Holy Spirit.
Veni Creator Spiritus.
Cardinal Parolin now invites the cardinals to pray briefly in silence, and then we'll offer a prayer opening the conclave.
Oremus. Ecclesiae tue Domine, rector et custos, infunde
Lord, ruler and
quesumus,
protector of your
famulis
church, pour
tuis
forth upon your
spiritum
servants, we beseech
intelligentiae,
you, a spirit of
veritatis
discernment,
et
of truth,
pacis,
and of peace,
ut
so that they
que
may
tibi
acknowledge with
placita
all their heart
sunt,
the things that are
toto
pleasing to
corde
you, and
cognoscant,
cleave to those
et
things that
agnita
have been
tota virtute
perceived with
sectentur,
all their strength.
per Christum Dominum
Through
nostrum.
Christ our Lord. Amen.
And following the prayer, we transition into the part where all the cardinal electors take part in the solemn swearing of the oath, as we mentioned at the beginning, which invites them to take this conclave in a form of solemnity and to maintain an aura of secrecy with what goes
Nos
on.
omnes et singuli in hac electione summi
And this
pontificis
is the formula of the
versantes
oath that
cardinales
Cardinal Parolin is now
electores,
reading.
promittimus
Each and every one of
movemus
us,
et
cardinal electors
juramus
present at this election of the
inviolate
Supreme
et
Pontiff,
unguem,
promise,
nos esse
bind
fideliter et
ourselves, and
diligenter
swear to observe faithfully
observaturus
and
omnia,
scrupulously
quae
all the
continentur
prescriptions
in
contained in
constitutione
the Apostolic
apostolica
Constitution
summi
of the Supreme
pontificis
Pontiff,
Ioannis
John
Pauli
Paul
II,
II,
quae
Universi
averbis universi Dominici
Gregis,
Gregis incipit,
issued on February
data
22nd,
die altero et
1996,
vigesimo, mensis
and also the
februari,
modifications of the
anno
motu proprio
millesimo,
normas
nocentesimo,
nonullas
nonagesimo sexto,
of the Supreme
servatis
Pontiff Benedict
quoque
XVI on February
mutationibus in ea
22nd,
millatis, per
2013.
litteras apostolicas normas non nullas, a summo pontifice Benedicto XVI, die altero et vigesimo mensi februari, anno bismillesimo decimo tertio, motu proprio datas. Item promittimus vovemus et
Likewise, we promise,
juramus,
bind ourselves, and
quicunque
swear
nostrum,
that whoever of
Deo
us by
sic
divine
disponente,
disposition is elected
Romanus
Roman Pontiff,
Pontifex erit
will commit
electus,
himself to faithfully carry
eum
out the
munus
munus
Petrinum Pastoris
the Petrine
Ecclesiae
ministry
Universae,
of pastor of the
fideliter
universal church,
executurum,
and will not
esse,
fail to affirm
atque
and to defend
spiritualia et
boldly
temporalia
the
iura,
spiritual and temporal rights,
libertatemque sancte
as well as the
sedis,
freedom of the
integre
Holy
ac
See.
strenue asserere, atque tueri, nunquam esse destiturum. Precipue autem promittimus et juramus nos religiosissime
Above all, we
et
promise
quod
and swear
punctus
to observe
sive clericos
with the
sive
utmost
laicos
fidelity with all,
secretum
both
esse
clergy and
servaturus
laity,
Deis omnibus,
the
quae ad
secret
electionem Romani
concerning everything
Pontificis
related in any
commodo
way
libet pertinent,
to the election
et
of the Roman
deis,
Pontiff,
quae in loco electionis
and about what
aguntur,
happens in the place
scrutinium
of the
directum
election
vel indirecte
concerning directly
respiциentibus,
or indirectly the
neque
scrutiny,
idem secretum quoque modo
not to violate in any way this
sive
secret, both
perdurante novi
during and after the
pontificis
election of the new pontiff,
sivi etiam post,
unless
nisi
explicit
expressa
authorization
facultas
is
ab
given
eodem
by the
pontifice
pontiff
tributa
himself,
sit. Itemque,
and
nulli
not to
consensioni,
support or encourage any
dissensioni,
interference,
alique quilibet
opposition,
intercessioni,
or any other
quibus
form of intervention
autoritates seculares
by which secular
quis libet
authorities of
ordinis
any
et
order or
gradus,
degree
vel quivis
or any
hominum
group of
cetus vel
persons or
personae
individuals would
singulae
wish to
voluerint
interfere
sese
in
pontificis
the election of the
electioni
Roman
misere,
pontiff.
auxilium vel favorem prestaturus.
And after the oath has been read out by Cardinal Parolin, each of the cardinal electors individually, according to the order of precedence, will now swear to the oath according to the formula. And I,
Et ego Petrus Cardinalis Parolin, spondeo voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adiuvet, et ex Santa Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
and I, Pietro Cardinal Parolin, promise, bind myself, and swear, so help me God and these holy Gospels, which I touch with my hand. As you can see, for those of you watching on television, the book of the Gospels has been set up in the middle of the
Et ego Ferdinandus
Sistine
Cardinalis
Chapel,
Filoni,
and each cardinal is going to come up and
Spondio,
place his hand on the book of the
Vovio,
Gospels and swear
sic me
that
Deus
he will follow
aduvet,
the oath that has just been
et
read
ec
aloud
sancta
by Cardinal
Dei
Pietro
Evangelia,
Parolin.
que manu mea tango.
Et ego, Aloysius Antonius Cardinalis Tagli, Spondeo, Voveo, Acciur, sic me Deus adiuvet, et hec sancta Dei Evangelia, quae manu mea tango.
Et ego Robertus Franciscus Cardinalis Prevost, Spondeo Vovio Acciuro, sic me Deus adiuvet, et ec sancta Dei Evangelia, quae manu mea tango.
Et ego Luis Raphael Cardinalis Saco, Spondeo Voveo Acciuro, sic me Deus adiuvet, et hec sancta Dei Evangelia, quae manu mea tango.
Ego, et ego vinco Cardinalis Pulci, Spondeo Voveo Acciuro, sic me Deus adiuvet, et hac sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego Petrus Cardinalem Cojo Texan, Spondeo Voveo Acciuro, sic me Deus adiuvet, et hec sancta Dei Evangelia, quae manu mea tango.
Et ego Iosebus Cardinalis Bosanic, Spondeo Voveo Acciuro, sic me Deus adiuvet, et hec sancta Dei Evangelia, quae manu mea tango.
Et ego Philippus Cardinalis Barbara Spondeo Voveo Acciuro, sic me Deus adiuvet, et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, quae manu mea tango.
Et ego Petrus Cardinalis Erdes, Spondeo Voveo Acciuro, sic me Deus adiuvet, et hec sancta Dei Evangelia, quae manu mea tango.
Now, when the cardinals entered into the Sistine Chapel, they entered in reverse order, but now to read the oath one by one, they enter in order of seniority, but also by seniority of the order. So first, we had the order of bishops, cardinal bishops, led by Cardinal Pietro Parolin, followed by the Cardinal Patriarch of the Oriental Rite, and then there will be the Cardinal Presbyters, and ending with the Cardinal Deacons.
And when each cardinal has sworn to uphold the oath read by Cardinal Parolin, the Master of Pontifical Liturgical Celebrations will proclaim extra omnes, let everyone go out, basically expelling every who's not taking part in the actual election from the Sistine Chapel. The doors are then closed for the first time. The Master of Pontifical Liturgical Celebrations remains inside, along with Cardinal Cantalamessa, of course, who's taking part in the conclave, but has also been chosen to give the meditation. That is in accordance with the norms of the Apostolic Constitution University Dominici Gregis. You'll hear that title quite a bit. That is a document that guides every step of the conclave, and in fact the whole period of interregnum between the death or resignation of a pope and the election of a new pope. The Apostolic Constitution prescribes that the meditation should reflect on the very grave duty of electing a new pope, of the necessity of going into that election and making a choice with the right intentions, and of considering only the will of God, judgment of God, and the needs of Holy Mother Church. The cardinals are called to be concerned solely with the good of the universal Church.
Casimirus Pondeovoveo Giuro, Sigme Deus adjuvet et ex sancta Evangelii Dei, quae magnum mea tango.
Et ego Albertus Cardinalis Paterbendigedon spondeo voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet et ex sancta Dei Evangelia quae manu mea tango.
Et ego Reinhardus Cardinalis Marx spondeo voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet et ex sancta Dei Evangelia quae manu mea tango.
Et ego João Brás Cardinalis Diavis spondeo voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet et eco sancta Evangelia quae manu mea tango.
Et ego Thomas Cardinalis Collins spondeo voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet et ex sancta Dei Evangelia quae manu mea tango.
Et ego Willem Jacobus Cardinalis Eijk spondeo voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet et ex sancta Dei Evangelie quae manu mea tango.
Et ego Joseph Cardinalis Betori spondeo voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet et ex sancta Dei Evangelia quae manu mea tango.
Et ego Timothy Cardinalis Dolan spondeo voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet et ex sancta Dei Evangelia quae manu mea tango.
Et ego Rainer Maria Cardinalis Wölki spondeo voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet et haec sancta Dei Evangelia quae muna mea tango.
Et ego Jacobis Cardinalis Harvey spondeo roveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet et haec sancta Dei Evangelia de manu mea tango.
Et ego Basilius Cardinalis Clemis spondeo voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet et haec sancta Dei Evangelia quae manu mea tango.
Et ego Gerardus Ludovicus Cardinalis Müller spondeo voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet et haec sancta Dei Evangelia quae manu mea tango.
Et ego Vincent Cardinalis Nichols spondeo voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet et haec sancta Dei Evangelia quae manu mea tango.
Et ego Leopoldo José Cardinalis Brenes Solórzano spondeo voveo ex iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet et ex sancta Dei Evangelia quae manu mea tango.
Et ego Gérald Cyprien Cardinalis Lacroix spondeo boveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet et ex sancta Dei Evangelia quae manu mea tango.
And as we see each of the cardinals coming up and taking the oath, as we mentioned at the beginning, there's quite a number of cardinals for countries that have never had a cardinal elector participate in a conclave. There are at least 15 countries that this is the first time that their country will be represented in the election of a pontiff. And those countries include Myanmar, Haiti, Central African Republic, Cape Verde, Papua New Guinea, Malaysia, Sweden, Luxembourg, East Timor, Singapore, Paraguay, South Sudan, Serbia, and Mongolia, and Rwanda. And this is the most international in history, with representatives from 71 countries, making it a very international and wide-reaching representation of the universality of the Catholic Church.
Sic me Deus adiuvet, et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego Philippus Cardinalis Vedraugo, spondeo voveo at Euro, sic me Deus adiuvet, et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego Scibli Cardinalis Langlois, spondeo voveo ac Io, sic me Deus adjuvet, et hec sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego Manuel Cardinalis Clement, spondeo voveo ac Euro, sic me Deus adjuvet, et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego Brahana Iesus Cardinalis Raphael, spondeo voveo ac Euro, sic me Deus adjuvet, et hec sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego John Cardinalis Jew, spondeo vovio ac Euro, sic me Deus adjuvit, et haec sancta Dei Evangelii, qui manu mea tango.
Et ergo Charles Cardinalis Bo, spondeo voveo ac Euro, sic me Deus adjuvet, et anca sancta Dei Evangelia, qui manu mea tango.
Et ego Francis Xavier Cardinalis Cringsacoit Vanis spondeo voveo ac Euro, sic me Deus adjuvat, et hec sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego Franciscus Cardinalis Montenegro, spondeo voveo ac Euro, sic me Deus adjuvet, et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego Daniel Cardinalis Sturla Veruet, spondeo voveo ac Euro, sic me Deus adjuvet, et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego Arlindo Cardinalis Gomes Furtado, spondeo voveo ac Euro, sic me Deus adjuvet, et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego Soane Patita Cardinalis Maffi, spondeo voveo ac Euro, sic me Deus adjuvet, ec haec sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego Dieudonné Cardinalis Nzapalainga, spondeo voveo ad Euro, sic meus Deus adjuvent,
et ec santa Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego, Cardinal Osoro, spondeo adjuro, si me Deus adjuvet et santa Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego, Sergio Cardinalis da Rocha, spondeo volveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego Blasius Cardinalis Supic, spondeo volveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet et hic sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego Joseph de Cardinalis de Ceso spondeo volveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego Carlos Cardinalis Aguiarretes, spondeo boveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet et ex santa Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
And perhaps
brief curiosity in this process as each cardinal swears to uphold this oath, and each one has to do it individually because each one is personally responsible for his promise. Some of the cardinals have given their first name in Latin, some of them give it in their native language, and their last names are all the last names as they would say them in real life. And when we have the announcement of the new Pope, hopefully guided by the Holy Spirit very soon, the announcement will be made in a similar fashion where they will read the formula for the announcement of a new Roman Pontiff. The first name will be read in Latin, followed by their title, and concluding with their last name in everyday language. And so those who are watching on the night of the election after the White Smoke comes out, there will be lots of people with lists of first names of cardinals in Latin.
Et ego Angelus Cardinalis de Donatis spondeo boveo ac iuro, sic me Deus audiuet et ecca sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango. There is no such time limit for a conclave.
The cardinals are expected to have a vote immediately this evening.
Ego Joseph Cardinalis
each cardinal writes out the vote on a paper ballot, disguising their handwriting so that we can preserve anonymity as much as possible. And for the election of a new pope, a full 2/3 of the voting cardinals need to make their choice for the same person. And as I mentioned, there should be a vote this evening. We will have coverage beginning at 6 p.m. Rome time in anticipation of the results of that first vote, which will be signaled with burning of the ballots and the black or white smoke coming from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel. All of that happens behind closed doors. If there is if a pope is not elected this evening, the conclave concludes for the day, and we'll pick up again tomorrow morning with Mass and prayer. And each day, subsequent day, there are 2 votes in the morning if necessary, and 2 votes in the afternoon if necessary. If no pope is elected, the black smoke comes out after the second vote. If Pope is elected, of course, the white smoke will come out after whichever vote it happens at. After several rounds of voting, if it takes that long, There is provision in the Apostolic Constitution for a period for a break where the cardinals will not vote, and then they will pick up after a day of reflection and prayer. They'll pick up again the following day and continue again in groups of successive votes with certain periods programmed in, where if there is a longer conclave, they will have various points at which they'll be able to take a break and reflect and pray. It's been a very long time since we've had conclave go more than a few days. Since the beginning of the 20th century, the longest conclave lasted only 7 votes in 1903 and took place over the course of 5 days. The voting schedule is not the same as it is now. So we will be taking a break after the extra omnes and the closing of the doors of the Sistine Chapel, and then we will resume our live broadcast this evening at 6 p.m. Rome time, and we'll be giving coverage of the conclave leading up to the expected first smoke signal, as it were, announcing the outcome of this evening's ballot for the papacy.
Et ego Alvaro Cardinalis Ramazzini spondeo voveo adjuro.
And we're currently in the midst of the cardinals of the Order of Presbyters, which will be followed by the Order of Deacons. Once again, each cardinal makes the oath in his own name, taking personal responsibility for his promise and his commitment to maintain the secrecy of the conclave, to faithfully carry out the Patrine ministry if elected, and a solemn oath to affirm and defend boldly the spiritual and temporal rights, the religious and secular rights, as well as the freedom of the Holy See. The oath also speaks about the necessity of faithfully and scrupulously observing all of the prescriptions that the popes have laid out for the conduct of the conclave, and we can be assured the whole apparatus and procedure of the conclave is designed to ensure that there can be no doubt about the valid election of the next Pope. And we know that these cardinals all take very seriously this very religious commitment to elect a new Bishop of Rome.
Spondeo voveo acuro, sic me Deus adjuvet, et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, quae manu mea tango.
Et ego Augustus Paulus, Cardinalis lo Iudice, spondeo voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adiuvet, et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, quae manu mea tango.
Et ego Ioannes Marcus, Cardinalis Avelin, spondeo voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adiuvet, et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, quae manu mea tango.
Et ego Peter e bere Cardinalis Abaleke, spondeo voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adiuvet, et hex sancta Dei Evangelia, quae manu Deo tango.
Et ego Leonardus Udalricus Cardinalis Steiner, spondio vovio ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet, et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, quae manu mea tango.
Et ego Philippus Neri, Cardinalis Ferrau, spondeo vovio ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet, et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego, Robertus Cardinalis McElroy, spondio, vovio, acuro, sic me Deus adiuvet, et haec sancta Dei Evangelii, que manu mea tango.
Et ego, Virgilius Cardinalis Ducarmo da Silva, spondio, vovio, adiuro, sic me Deus audivet, et haec sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego, Anscarius Cardinalis Cantoni, spondeo, voveo, acciuro, sic me Deus adiuvet, et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego, Pula Cardinalis Anthony, spondeo, voveo, acciuro, sic me Deus adiuet, et ac sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego, Paulus Cesar Cardinalis Costa, spondeo, voveo, atiuro, sic me Deus adiuvet, et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego, William Cardinalis Co, spondeo, voveo, ac euro, sic me Deus adiuvet, et ac sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego, Adalbertus Cardinalis Martinez Flores, spondeo, voveo, adjuro, sic me Deus adiuve, et sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego, Georgius Cardinalis Marengo, spondeo, voveo, ac iuro, sic me Deus adiuvet, et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego, Petrus Baptista Cardinalis Pizzaballa, spondeo, voveo, ac iuro, sic me Deus adiuvet, et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego, Stephen Cardinalis Brislin, spondio, vovio, adiugoro, sic me Deus adiuvet, et haec sancta Dei Evangelia, quae manu mea tango.
Et ego, Angelus Sixtus Cardinalis Rossi, spondio, vovio, ac iuro, sic me Deus adiuvet, et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego, Aloysius Joseph Cardinalis Rueda Aparicio, spondeo, voveo, ac iuro, sic me Deus adiuvet, et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego, Gregorius Cardinalis Risch, spondeo, voveo, ac iuro, sic me Deus adiuvet, et haec sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego, Mula Stephen Martin Mula, spendo, vevo, ac iura, sic me Deu advent, ad hac sancta Dei Evangelia, qui mani mea tango.
Et ego, Joseph Cardinalis Covocano, spondeo, voveo, adiuro, sic me Deu adiuvet, et ec sancta Dei Evangelia, quae manu mea tango.
Et ego protasius cardinalis rugambua, spondeo, voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet, et hec sancta Dei Evangelia, quae manu mea tango.
Et ego Sebastian Cardinalis Francis, spondeo, voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet, et hec sancta Dei Evangelia, quae manu mea tango.
Et ego Stephen Cardinalis Chao, spondeo, voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvove, et ac sancta Dei Evangelia, quae manu mea tango.
Et ego Franciscus Saverius Cardinalis Bustillo, spondeo, voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet, et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, quae manu mea tango.
Et ego Americum Cardinalis Aguiar, spondeo, voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet, et ec sancta Dei Evangelia, quae manu mea tango.
Et ego Carlos Cardinalis Castillo, spondeo, voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet, et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, quae manu mea tango.
Et ego Vicente Cardinalis Bocalich, spondeo, voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet, et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, quae manu mea tango.
Et ego Luis Gerardo Cardinalis Cabrera, spondeo, voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet, et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, quae manu mea tango.
And as we mentioned before, the conclave is when the cardinals are locked in the Sistine Chapel, and that comes from the Latin phrase conclave, literally means with a key. And this stemmed from the time when, during the conclave in 1268 in Viterbo, because the papal see had to be moved from Rome due to the overwhelming violence that was taking place in the Eternal City. So the papal see was moved to a small town, Viterbo, right outside of Rome, and it was the longest conclave in history, lasting just about 3 years, and to encourage the cardinals who had taken so long, the citizens of Viterbo had locked the cardinals into the palace of the popes in Viterbo, and also kept them limited to bread and water to, again, encourage an election, a quicker election, but it still ended up taking until September of 1271, after about 3 years without a pontiff, and it was at that time that Pope Gregory X was elected. And it's from that time that we actually get the beginnings of the modern conclave process that we see today, which actually, the pontiff that was elected during that time, Gregory X, he published an apostolic constitution, Ubi Periculum, with more concrete rules on how the selection of a pope should be carried out, and that's the apostolic constitution that remains the basis of this modern-day process that we are seeing the beginning of now, with these cardinals taking the oath of secrecy.
Et ego Cardinalis Johannes Paulus, et ego Johannes Paulus Cardinalis Vesco, spondeo, vovevo ac iuro, sic me Deus adjuvet, et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, quae manu mea tango.
Et ego Dominicus Josephus Cardinalis Mathieu, spondeo voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adiuvet et et sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego Robertus Cardinalis Repole, spondeo voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adiuvet et ec sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego Baldassare Cardinalis Reina, spondeo voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adiuvet et ec sancta Dei Evangelii, que manu mea tango.
Et ego Franciscus Cardinalis Leo, spondeo voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adiuvet et ec sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego Micola Cardinalis Bicioc, spondeo voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adiuvet et ec sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego Dominicus Cardinalis Battaglia, spondeo voveo ac iuro, sic me Deus adiuvet et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
And now we move on to the order of
Et ego
deacons,
Dominicus Cardinalis Mamberti, spondeo
including
voveo
the
ac
Cardinal
iuro,
Camerlengo, who had
sic me
responsibility
Deus
for
adiuvet et ex
the
sancta
property,
Evangelia
the
Dei
fiscal
Evangelia, que
goods of
manu
the
mea
patrimony
tango.
of St. Peter, and has an important role during
Et
the
ego
papal
Marius
interregnum, the
Cardinalis
Sedicante,
Zenari, spondeo voveo ac iuro,
as we
sic me Deus adiuvet et
get
ex
closer
sancta
to
Dei
the
Evangelia, que manu mea
last of
tango.
the cardinals making their oath to
Et ego
faithfully
Kevin Cardinalis
adhere to the rules for the
Faro,
conclave,
spondeo voveo et ac iuro,
fulfill the duties of the patriarch
sic
ministry
me
if they are
Deus
chosen as
adiuvet
pope,
et ex sancta
and
Dei
especially
Evangelia,
to preserve
qua manu
the
mea
secrecy
tango.
that is involved with the election of the Roman pontiff.
Et ego Conradus Cardinalis Krajewski, spondeo
We
voveo
will
ac iuro,
approach the point where we
sic
will
me
hear
Deus adiuvet et
the
ex
master
sancta Dei
of
Evangelia,
pontifical
que manu
liturgical
mea
ceremonies
tango.
proclaim the Latin phrase extra omnes.
Ed ego
Let everyone go out,
Josephus Tolentinos Cardinalis de Mendoza,
calling all those who are not
spondeo
cardinal electors
vovio
to
ac iuro,
leave the
sic me
Sistine
Deus
Chapel.
adiuvet et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu
Papal
mea
MC
tango.
will remain within the Sistine Chapel
Et
briefly
ego
while
Michael Felix Cardinalis Czerny,
Cardinal
spondeo
Cantalamessa gives
voveo ac
the
iuro, sic me Deus
meditation
adiuvet
to
et
the
ec
cardinals
sancta Dei
according to the
Evangelii,
Apostolic
que manu mea
Constitution
tango.
Universi Dominici Graecis. And
Et ego Marius Cardinalis Grec,
at the conclusion of that meditation,
ac iuro, sic me
with
Deus
the
adiuvet et ac
papal
sancta Dei
ceremoniaire,
Evangelia,
the papal master
que
of
manu mea
ceremonies,
tango.
guiding the ceremony, he will then leave the Sistine Chapel. He will ensure that all of the entrances to the Sistine Chapel are closed and secured, the guard is posted, and the cardinals will proceed with the first ballot according to the ceremony. After the papal MC leaves the Sistine Chapel, the cardinal dean or the person acting on his behalf, having consulted the electors, will immediately invite them to consider any business that they feel must be urgently addressed. And in the absence of any urgent business, or after that has been concluded, the cardinal electors will proceed to the first vote, again according to all the procedures laid out in the Apostolic Constitution Universi Dominici Graecis. And the ceremony indicates finally that first session of the conclave may be fittingly and appropriately closed by invoking the help of the Virgin Mother of God, Mary Most Holy, with the very ancient and traditional Marian prayer and hymn, Sutum Presidium. We fly to thy protection, O Holy Mother of God. Despise not our petitions and our necessities, but deliver us always from all dangers, O glorious and blessed Virgin.
Ac ego, Emilius Paulus, Cardinalis Ceric, spondeo, voveo, ediu acuro, sic me Deus adjuvet, et ex sancte Dei Evangelia, que manu meo tango.
Et ego, Christophorus Cardinalis, Pierre, spondeo, voveo, at juro, sic me Deus adjuvet, et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tengo. Et ego, Angelus Cardinalis Fernandez Artime, spondeo, voveo, ac juro. Sic me Deus adjuvet, et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego, Rolandus Cardinalis Makritskas, spondeo, voveo, ac juro. Sic me Deus adjuvet, et ex sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego, Timotheus Cardinalis Radcliffe, spondeo, voveo, ac juro, sic me Deus adjuvet, et ex sancte Dei Evangelii, que manu meo tango.
Et ego, Fabius Cardinalis Baggio, spondeo, voveo, ac juro, sic me Deus adjuvet, et ec sancte Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
Et ego, Georgium Cardinalis Cuvacad, spondeo, voveo, ac juro, sic me Deus adjuvet, et ec sancta Dei Evangelia, que manu mea tango.
And George Jacob Cardinal Kovacad, the final Cardinal Deacon, swears the oath. And we proceed to the closing of
Extra omnes.
We hear those words in Latin where it means everyone out, signaling when all the non-essential people in the Sistine Chapel are invited to leave and the cardinals can begin their discussions.
So for those of you watching on television, there are a number of notaries who were there in their capacity to formally recognize the beginning of the conclave, and a number of other persons who are in attendance for various reasons. All of them are ordered out of the Sistine Chapel, and as soon as they leave, the doors will be closed, the meditation will be given, the papal MC will leave, and the solemn closing, locking, and guarding of the doors of the conclave will take place, followed by the first vote this evening. And with the exit from the Sistine Chapel, our live coverage of the Cardinal's entrance into conclave for the election of the 267th Pope draws to a close. We do invite you to visit our Vatican News website, Facebook, Instagram, X, and YouTube accounts for continuous coverage of the conclave. On behalf of the Vatican Media, we'd like to thank our sound engineer Mario and our audio coordinators and all of our producers, as well as our media partners, EWTN TV, Catholic Faith Network in America, Shalom World Television's Network USA, Luminous Radio, at Madarshan TV, Catholic TV, and Uganda Catholic Television, who help make this broadcast possible.
My name is Kelsey Gussie.
And I'm Christopher Wells. It's been our very great pleasure providing the English commentary and translation of the ceremony of the entrance into the conclave for you.
A very special thank you to all of you for joining us wherever you have been listening or watching. And don't forget to join Chris and our colleague Linda Bordoni again in just a few minutes at 6 p.m. local Rome time for the live commentary as we await the Cardinal's decision, and keep an eye out on the chimney on the Sistine Chapel for either black or white smoke later this evening.
Praise be Jesus Christ. Laudetur Jesus Christus.
checking if they. Laudetur Jesus Christus, praised be Jesus Christ. A very warm welcome to all of you joining us for this live broadcast as we await a possible white smoke signal coming out of the chimney of the Sistine Chapel. It's the first day of the conclave, and I'm here in Vatican Radio studio together with my colleague Christopher Wells. Hello, Christopher.
Hello, Linda, and we've just concluded the ceremony for the closing of the conclave with the cardinals. They began with a moment of prayer in the Pauline Chapel, just very close to the Sistine Chapel, and then went in solemn procession in hierarchical order into the chapel. They swore their oath of secrecy, their oath to fulfill the office of the Petrine ministry if they are elected, and to faithfully observe all of the norms for the election of the Roman Pontiff. So just a few moments ago we heard the Latin expression extra omnes, which calls everyone to leave the Sistine Chapel except for the cardinal electors, and the cardinals are currently hearing a meditation on their duty, and we expect them to proceed to the first vote in the next half hour or so.
So yes, meanwhile we have two very prestigious guests with us here today. Thank you for joining us. Philippa Hitchen, former Vatican Radio journalist, currently communications officer for the Lutheran World Federation. She was actually the person who saw the white smoke for us on that 13th of March 2013 when Jorge Bergoglio was elected as Pope Francis. And we also have a historian, a church historian, Dr. Donald Prudlow. Did I say that right, Dr. Prudlow? Welcome and thank you. He will be filling us in with lots of details. Right now, I think the best thing to do would be go to the square, where we have Devon Watkins, who's sassing out the situation. He's been talking to some of the people in the square. Hello, Devon, can you hear us? Hello. Okay, so perhaps there are some issues with telephone lines because, as you know, the whole of the Vatican has been, I don't know what the right word is, but telecommunications have been under control here, so people may have issues in connecting. Can you hear me, Devin? No. Okay. We will try again. Meanwhile, Chris, what if we go into our first insert? As Chris was explaining, the cardinals are currently in the Sistine Chapel. We've seen the extra omnes, everybody out. And we have here a program by Veronica Scaresbrick, who interviewed Monsignor Charlie Burns to tell us all about what actually happens from the moment the cardinals are brought into the chapel, and he's going to walk us through the process of voting, casting the ballots and burning them. And we were listening there to a program produced by Veronica Scaresbrick, who was interviewing Monsignor Charles Burns. He was the ecclesiastical advisor to the British Embassy to the Holy See. He also served as a canon of St. Peter's Basilica, and he continues to be active in Rome, although he's retired from his role in the Vatican archives after 35 years.
And here with us in studio this evening, we have Dr. Donald Prudlow, my friend from very way back. Dr. Prudlow is the Warren Professor of Catholic Studies at the University of Tulsa in Oklahoma in the United States. Dr. Prudlow, thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here on this historic occasion.
And you have your academic field is history, and especially medieval history. And maybe tell us, the popes haven't always been elected through this very elaborate process of the conclave. Maybe you could say a few words to start us off with the original process for choosing the Bishop of Rome.
It's a very old institution. We're electing the 267th successor of St. Peter. And for the first millennium, the election was largely done by the clergy of Rome, and in very early days by an accession of the people of Rome together. But as time went on, two problems arose around the year 1000, and that was how to provide representation for a church that was rapidly growing throughout Europe and then throughout the world for this very important position. And the second is how to free papal elections from secular domination, from the domination of kings and princes and emperors, and how to make it secure as a religious office.
And that's where we saw the rise of the position of cardinal, which is not a biblical position, it's an ecclesiastical position, and it developed out of the clergy of Rome and still has a connection to the clergy of Rome.
Absolutely. It's critical that the cardinals can trace their lines back to the early, particularly the parishes of Rome, the deaconries of Rome, and that allows them, so when we saw last Sunday all of the cardinals going out to their titular parishes where they're pastors of and saying Mass there and meeting the people in those parishes, technically they are the pastor of that, and as a pastor of the city of Rome, they are entitled by ancient right to elect the Bishop of Rome. But notice what that does is, let's say a bishop from England or a bishop from Germany, from France, the Pope particularly wants them as an advisor, wants to give Germany, France, Italy, Spain a say in the election. He will appoint them as an advisor, a title that came to be assigned with cardinals, from cardines, the hinges of the Roman Church, the close associates of the Roman Church. And in this way, through the medieval process of representation was a very important principle in medieval Europe. The entire world has been given an opportunity, a say, in the election of the Roman Pontiff, which is itself such a position of worldwide import. And we saw cardinals today from all over the globe participating in that process.
In fact, that's something that was a particular focus for Pope Francis, who named a number of cardinals from countries that had never had a cardinal before and who now are participating in this conclave. Now, you mentioned, Don, that over the course of the centuries, and especially in what's sometimes known as the Dark Ages, there were problems with the papacy. There was influence from secular and other sources, and they started to begin the process of solidifying the election to ensure the absence of outside interference, also to ensure the spiritual import of the election. Can you talk to us a little bit about the development of the conclave as we know it now, the first conclaves, and how it developed into the current process?
Absolutely. Since Rome is, in a certain sense, the central hub of the wheel of the Church, it's an important position. We know that. We saw the worldwide representation at Pope Francis's funeral, and we see what a significant power that this office can hold. And so that makes it important, that makes it interesting for secular rulers to try to interfere in the selection in order to get a candidate that might be more friendly to their political or earthly interests. And so starting in the 11th century with the purification of the papacy after a dark period, as you say, the election was reserved to the cardinals. And then in the 13th century, after a particularly difficult conclave, in fact a conclave that lasted almost 3 years in the beautiful city of Viterbo, that resulted in the eventual election of Gregory X, he decided that he was going to sequester the cardinals away, conclave, with a key, in a room, and keep them there until that they had reached their decision. And even this sometimes wasn't enough to get them to make up their minds. The city of Viterbo during that conclave actually put the cardinals on bread and water at one point, and even took the roof off the papal palace where they were meeting so they'd be exposed to the elements in order to, let us say, hasten a decision to get the church a pastor again. Gregory X issued a document called Ubi Periculum, which laid down many of the rules for the conclave that still applies today, described in the program we just heard and in the events that we just witnessed. Now, over the course of the years, that becomes solidified. Particularly, we start to see when the papacy returns to Rome after the Avignon period, the conclave becomes much more settled. It starts to be held in the papal palace, in the Vatican, in the Apostolic Palace. Sometimes it'll go back to St. John Lateran, but most of the time it starts to be held in 1492 in the Sistine Chapel, where it continues to be held to the present day. The last conclave that was outside the city of Rome was during the Napoleonic period in 1800. When all sorts of untoward things were happening around Europe, and so the papacy had to find a new way to make do.
Professor, you were just saying there that you noticed the cardinals from all over the world, and we think the whole world is watching us at this moment, not only Catholics. Don't you think so, Philippa, who we know is part of the Lutheran World Federation? You're here for the conclave. Your delegation will be here. What is your perspective on that?
Yes, thank you, Linda. It's good to be back in studio with you again, as we were back in 2013. And as you say, this historic election of a new pope is something that is of interest far beyond the Catholic world. You mentioned, of course, the great interest in the secular world, and I don't think we've ever seen quite so many journalists and media and people following the election and the funeral. They talk about this as the first election really of the social media era, and I think I'm absolutely amazed to see how many young people, my own children, people who have never really had that much interest in the intricate processes that you've been describing, what goes on behind those closed doors. Suddenly there is an explosion of fascination for what goes on. I think the film Conclave, of course, has also had a lot to do with that. Everybody is now a little bit of an expert, having seen the film. I haven't seen the statistics myself, but I'm told that the numbers of downloads have skyrocketed since the death of Pope Francis. But coming back to your question, yes, I have always been particularly interested in the ecumenical aspects of these elections, having followed very closely the ecumenical scene under the pontificates of John Paul II, then Pope Benedict, and then of course Pope Francis. And yes, there is a very strong presence. At the funeral there was some strong presence of ecumenical delegates attending the funeral in St. Peter's Square, and there will be again at the installation of the new Pope once we know who he is.
Right now we're watching images of the square, and we've just been seeing a lot of media out there with their cameras, and I think we have Devon on the line now. He is in the square. We go to him if the blockers are not working right now. Devon? There you are, great. Good. We know that Romans traditionally flock to the square once they see the white smoke. I don't want to make any previsioni, as we say here in Rome, forecasts. We're not really expecting white smoke in this first session, but you never know. People are there to wait for the smoke. I understand you also spoke to a few of the people in the square, and we will be playing some of those clips in a while. Meanwhile, anything relevant that they have been telling you that you think might be interesting? Thank you very much, Devon, for bringing us live a bit of excitement from the square. We continue to watch the images, the Roman seagull sitting next to the famous chimney right there. Back to Philippa and to Professor Prudlo here in studio. We have so much to talk about. Perhaps Philippa, looking a little bit at what Pope Francis's legacy has brought us as regards the Church's ecumenical path forward. What are you looking towards? What do you hope the next Pope may be able to build on that legacy?
As you say, there is, or as we were saying earlier, there is a lot of expectation from other Christian churches and other Christian leaders, looking back with immense gratitude to the legacy of Pope Francis. If I can just remember back to the conclave in 2013 and to his election, that announcement which took a lot of people by surprise. Bergoglio wasn't one of the top names that people were expecting, but I can never forget that moment that he stepped out onto the balcony describing himself as the Bishop of Rome, and the effect that that had on some of the ecumenical guests, some of the other leaders who were listening to his words, and hearing a new openness that in fact continued to be the path that he followed throughout the 12 years of his pontificate. You know, this was a man who talked about how his door was always open, and that included not just to Catholics but to everybody, people of all different churches and of course different faiths and no faith at all. And so there were some extremely significant events that I was very privileged to be part of. I think particularly of the Lutheran World Federation and Pope Francis marking together the 500th anniversary of the Reformation. I remember when I first heard about the possibility of that happening, saying to colleagues around Rome, you know...
Yes, you were here at the radio back then.
Absolutely, and I remember saying the Pope is going to mark the anniversary, the 500th anniversary of the Reformation, together with the Lutherans, and people saying, you're daydreaming, that's never going to happen. But of course, the Pope travelled to Sweden, and together with the Lutheran World Federation leadership, he had a very significant liturgy in Lund Cathedral, and then went on to the stadium in Malmö, where together they looked to the past, they asked forgiveness for the sins, the divisions, the terrible sins that came out of the divisions of the Reformation, and then pledged to overcome that by working together into the future. And I think that was one of the very significant events that I was privileged to be part of, and of course, as you say, now continuing to work in that vein with the Lutheran World Federation.
He also brought about many other changes in all aspects that we saw from day to day. Professor Prudlo, you are very knowledgeable of things past, but you're also an observer of current affairs. What would you say some of the most, say, interesting to the general public changes have been as regards liturgy, as regards ceremony, and all these things that we are witnessing right now?
Well, I really agree with what Philippa said about this being very much on social media and very much open to the world, and so people seeing some of these very ancient things for the first time and being quite impressed by them and wanting to know more what's because in previous times these conclaves would happen so far away from people's minds before the age of news, telegraphs and things like that. You might be informed a year or so later that you had a new pope and you had to change the name in the liturgy. So this is a great opportunity for outreach for the Catholic Church, for sure. One thing that's changed in the last 150 years is conclaves have gotten so much shorter. Conclaves used to be 50, 60, 70, 100. There was the one conclave that was 181 days, and as recently as the 18th century. And I think that's come about as a result of increased communication. Cardinals are able to know each other more. We know more about what's going on in the world more immediately. And so those have come down as well. And I think cardinals today are sensitive to the idea that perhaps a long conclave might not be very adaptable for the modern media, that would lead to all sorts of problems. So a lot of things get worked out. But you have elections as the Church opens to the world. In 1903 you have the first non-European elector, Cardinal Gibbons of Baltimore. But then you start to run into problems. How is the church going to manage to get those cardinals from so far away? And in 1914, 1922, the conclave happened so quickly, the American and Canadian cardinals weren't able to be there. And so that's when they added the 15-day rule, which now with the advent of air travel, right, becomes a little easier. But now that, as Kristen, you were saying, that cardinals coming from all over the world, from Tonga, from Burma, from Mongolia, the flights aren't as regular, so they need to have more time to make sure.
Some of them only just arrived 2 days ago.
Yes,
the last
can you
one.
imagine that,
yes.
right? Just being dropped into the middle of this from your country. And that's astonishing. We talked also about secular interference in elections, and people think, well, that was a Middle Ages problem. And in fact, the European monarchs, the Catholic European monarchs, all through the 17th, 18th, 19th century, had the right to veto candidates. And as recently as 1903, the Austro-Hungarian emperor excluded a candidate, which led, of course, to the election of St. Pius X, which was a sort of good outcome. And he himself abolished what was called the jus exclusive, the right of European monarchs to object to particular candidates. And so that, and then we see other changes in 1971. 81-year-olds and above were disallowed from participation in the conclave. But we saw how healthy their contributions were in the general congregations in the events leading up to the conclave. So there have been a lot of times in church history where the conclave and the cardinalate is one of those adaptations that the church has made through history in order to meet these challenging demands that have come up over these 2,000 years.
And I think, too, talking about the changes in the conclave, we've seen how a change originally to accommodate cardinals who are coming from far away, this long period between the death of the Pope and the entrance into the conclave, has changed in its purpose. 100 years ago, that was to make sure someone could jump on a boat and get from South America or even Australia now and make it to Rome in time for the conclave. Now, we've heard a lot of talk in the past couple of weeks about cardinals having an opportunity to get to know one another. Even though they can see one another in the papers, in the media, they can talk to one another on the phone, but to have the real experience of being here in Rome, in person, and I think that's something that Pope Francis would have said too, speaking about the importance of relationships and getting to know someone personally. And so that is a change that originally had one purpose in the church and has subsequently had a new purpose. Even something like excluding interference, what that looked like 500 years ago when, Henry VIII was King of England, and what that looks like now when you have dictatorships, you have governments that are run on X or TikTok, and the purpose of excluding people from the conclave started with one end in mind, and the church has adapted that, and it still serves a purpose, even if that's not what was originally foreseen by the people who implemented that change in the system.
But it's all stayed incredibly secret. We know that yesterday everyone who is participating in the proceedings, and that's not only the cardinals who are voting, but obviously they're medics, there are people making meals, they're the cleaners, they're the florists. They all took an oath of secrecy yesterday, swearing that not a single thing they're going to be hearing in these days would be leaked out. I know that there are a couple of walkie-talkies that can be used in an emergency if they need to call a medic, but their cell phones have been taken away, they can't read the papers, they don't watch television, there is no radio. So yes, it really is.
It may depend on how long they can go without cell phones.
Well, and it's interesting too, you started to allude to this, there are several officials among the cardinals who do have